Hello students, Mrs. Klein's here with your next section of video notes over patterns in evolution and speciation. As you have learned, evolution by natural selection is not random. Natural selection can have direction based on which variations of traits in a population are more favorable. As a result, those with the beneficial variation of a trait survive to reproduce, and those that do not possess that particular variation will eventually die off. Therefore, the effects of natural selection add up over time. For example, in the hypothetical population in the image shown on your screen, green body color is favored by natural selection. You can see in generation 1, we start with equal numbers of all 4 traits. But over time, or with each generation, alleles or variations of a trait that are associated with green body color increase in frequency. Over time, more and more individuals in the population will have the advantageous phenotype, the green body color in this case, because those are the individuals that are surviving to pass on their traits because they are better adapted to their environment. Now let's discuss some patterns that we observe in evolutionary processes. The first is coevolution. Coevolution is a pattern in evolution caused by species outcompeting one another. Essentially, the evolution in one species affects the evolution of another species, creating what we might think of as an evolutionary arms race. Coevolution is most often seen when different species have close ecological interactions with one another, such as predator-prey or parasite-host relationships, species that compete with another, or species that have a mutualistic symbiotic relationship. For example, there is currently an evolutionary arms race going on with humans and bacteria. When you get sick from a bacterial infection, like when you get strep throat, you take antibiotics. However, because there are variations in traits, some bacteria will survive through the antibiotics because they are resistant. This is why it is especially important and why you should finish all of the prescriptions provided by your doctor, even if you start feeling better before your round of antibiotics is complete. The bacteria that are strong enough to survive will reproduce and become resistant to the antibiotic. This is when you return to your doctor and say the antibiotic is not working. So the doctor then gives you a different one. Bacteria are constantly coming up with different variations due to mutations. So our antibiotics, as a result, are becoming less effective. So we are, as humans, trying to outcompete the antibiotic resistance of bacteria by coming up with new prescriptions all the time. Convergent evolution is another pattern or process in evolution in which organisms that are not closely related evolve similar traits, like similar body forms, coloration, or organs. But this occurs independently of one another. This is usually the result of undergoing the same evolutionary or environmental pressures, such as residing in similar habitats or having similar niches or jobs in the ecosystem in which they live. As a result, convergent evolution causes the formation of what we would call analogous structures to occur. Organisms are said to have analogous structures if the structure has similar functions, but the structure itself is different in its form. Therefore, analogous structures are not evidence of a common ancestor, and as a result, references the fact that convergent evolution has occurred and the organisms have undergone similar selective pressures from their environment. For example, though the northern bluefin tuna and the dusky dolphin look the same, they are unrelated. These organisms have undergone convergent evolution for fins and sleek bodies as a result of living in the ocean. Their fins and body shape are analogous structures because they are used for similar functions, but the organisms themselves are not closely related. After all, dolphins are mammals and tuna are fish. In this image, we see hawk wings, bat wings, and the wings of a butterfly. All of these organisms have evolved similar characteristics such as wings. However, their ancestry is much different because bat wings are made up of flaps of skin and bone, bird wings are made up of feathers, and butterfly wings are made up of chitin. We think of convergent evolution as the evolution of similar characteristics in organisms with different ancestry, basically as a result of living in similar environments. Divergent evolution is the next pattern that we are going to discuss. And this occurs when organisms that are or were once closely related evolve different traits or adaptations as a result of different environmental pressures. Through divergent evolution, homologous structures may develop. Homologous structures are similar body structures with different functions caused by related organisms being in different environments. Essentially, these different environments caused different adaptations to occur because specific variations were more favorable than others. For example, the forelimbs or front limbs of animals like humans, cats, whales, and bats are an example of both divergent evolution and homologous structures. They are an example of divergent evolution because all of these organisms share a common ancestor. They are an example of homologous structures because if you look at the bone structure and see the highlighted areas of the bone, the structures themselves are the same, but they have different functions. Human hand and arm are for grasping. The cats are front forelimbs for walking, the whales for swimming, the bats for flying. So these are all essentially homologous structures, meaning same structure. Another example of divergent evolution to consider is the red fox on the top left of your screen and the kite fox on the top right of your screen. The kite fox is common to areas of southwestern United States, as well as northern and central Mexico, while the red fox is more common in heavily forested and grassy ecosystems across the United States, Europe, and Asia. Interestingly enough, both of these species shared a common ancestor, seen in the image at the bottom of your screen. Over time, populations of the ancestral fox species became separated, and due to their different environments, each population underwent different selective pressures, causing divergent evolution to occur and two new species to be formed. It is obvious why these two species look so different now. If you think about it, the kite fox lives in the desert where it is hot and dry. Having larger ears, less fur, and a thinner frame is more beneficial in cooling the fox down, while the red fox has a more stocky frame, thicker fur, and the ears are not as thin. All of this helps the fox to maintain its body temperature in colder to more temperate environments. Extinctions are our last pattern of evolution, and probably the one you know the most about. I know you all could provide an example of at least one extinct species, like the dodo, passenger pigeon, or the western black rhinoceros. An extinction is defined as the elimination or disappearance of a species or larger group from Earth. Now, there are two types of extinctions. The first is called a background extinction. Background extinctions are caused by local changes in the environment that can be natural, like a forest fire, or man-made, like habitat destruction and poaching. Background extinctions affect only a few species in a small area and tend to be less severe overall to the ecosystem. One positive of background extinctions is that they generally occur at the same rate of speciation. Speciation is the formation of a new species. Although, due to the inherent human need for progress and development, we are currently accelerating the rate of background extinctions on our planet, which is why many scientists feel like we're headed for the sixth mass extinction event. Speaking of which, the second type of extinction is called a mass extinction. Mass extinctions are catastrophic events like ice ages and asteroids. As a result of these events, many species are destroyed on a global scale, which results in repercussions that are more severe. Mass extinctions are rare, but as you can tell, they are much more intense. We have had at least 5 mass extinctions on Earth in the last 600 million years. This graphic shows the mass extinction events and when they occurred, and you can probably think of when the last one took place. Throughout this unit, we have emphasized that evolution takes a long time, particularly that natural selection takes longer than artificial selection. And many of you may have been asking yourself, well, how long did it actually take? We're going to try to answer that question. Unfortunately, it will not be as concrete as you would like it to be. There is no exact time frame for evolution to occur. Fortunately, there are three processes that seek to explain the timing of evolution. The first process is known as gradualism. Gradualism, which is now illustrated in the image on your screen, is explained by the slow and steady change of one species into another that builds over time. This is evident in many parts of the fossil record. You can see in this fossil record, the newer fossils are over top of the older fossils. Over time, there is a slow, steady lineage change, and we can see that in the layers of rock. The evolution of the horse is a great example of gradualism. A lot has changed over about 50 million years. The second process is known as punctuated equilibrium. Punctuated equilibrium is represented by long periods of little change, which is then interrupted by short, rapid changes. This is also evident on your screen and has been supported in the fossil record. So very rapid change in lineage from one strata or layer to the next, not as gradual as we had seen with gradualism. The sudden rise in diversity of mammals after the extinction of the dinosaurs is an example of punctuated equilibrium. I will say it is important to note that punctuated equilibrium occurs after sudden environmental change, much like the asteroid that caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. Here is an image of punctuated equilibrium. The final process is known as adaptive radiation. This particular process of evolution is where one species can split into a number of different species. It essentially results in speciation, or the formation of a new species. Basically, what happens is an ancestral species is adapted to a different environment, so you can see the emergence of a new species from each environmental change. And if that sounds familiar from earlier, it is. Adaptive radiation is actually a type of divergent evolution. A common example of adaptive radiation was the diversification of mammals after the dinosaurs went extinct. Another example of divergent evolution or adaptive radiation is what we observed with Darwin's finches from the Galapagos Island, where each of them had a different beak adaptation from a common ancestor, all based on their diet or environmental pressures. That wraps up this section of notes. As always, if you have any questions, be sure to ask in class, and I will see you next time.